Look, another story that caught my eye today, I've got to say, it's caught the eye of a few of you guys at home, which I appreciate. The MP for Finchley and Golders Green, Mike Freer, he has said that he's standing down at the next election due to attacks and safety concerns. Let's have a little listen, shall we, to him speaking to our political editor, Christopher Hope, earlier on today.
Are you quitting as an MP?
There comes a point when the level of threat becomes, if you like, beyond the pale. 2 or 3 serious incidents where your life has been threatened. One was a very narrow miss, purely by, a fluke. I wasn't in the office. The man that went on to kill David Amess had come to Finchley, told the police. I've had 2 run-ins with Muslims Against Crusades, one quite serious where they burst into a surgery I was having in a mosque. And the common theme there seems to me my support for Israel. In fact, Muslim Against Crusades, when they burst in, said you're a Jewish homosexual pig.
I mean, I feel a little bit lost for words tonight. I'm not lost for words at all. I'm absolutely furious, quite frankly. I'm desperately trying to think to myself, how do I do a little bit of self-censorship before I do get myself into trouble? Matt Goodwin, where are you on this issue? 2024, and we've got a situation where a long-standing public servant, he's been an MP as well for many years, is now not going to run again. He's going to leave public office, essentially, because of threats to his life.
It's completely disgraceful. This story should be on the front page of every major national newspaper, and the Prime Minister should be issuing a robust statement. It is unacceptable that our elected politicians are fearing for their lives, fearing of radical Islamists. Let's be clear, let's call this what it is, radical Islamism, the same thing that resulted in the murder of David Ames, the same thing that tried to murder Stephen Timms. We have got a serious threat in this country that we need to be talking much more openly about. And, if you look at the recent review of terrorist activity in the UK, the Shawcross review, it was very clear. William Shawcross looked at this and he said, we have got to get real about the threat from radical Islamism within this society. It isn't a 50-50 threat. Yes, there was a case of Joe Cox and there was the tragic case of Joe Cox and the far-right extremist. William Shawcross makes the point that actually about 80% now of all open case investigations by the police involving terrorism concern radical Islamism. And of the, I think, of 13 serious cases of violence and murder he looked at, about 7 of those had been on the radar of the security services. I think this is a scandal. I think we've become normalised into basically accepting an ongoing threat from radical Islamism, and we should not be accepting this. We should be standing up and saying this is not on. We're not having our elected politicians being harassed and pushed out of office in this way.
Aaron?
Well, quickly on William Shawcross, he's one of these people who's a commissioner, and I would scrap lots of commissioners and quangos because we waste lots of money on them. If somebody has a strong view which is going to influence government policy on people's safety and the safety of politicians, they should be a police officer, they should be a civil servant or a politician, not some commissioner. So park that for a moment. I would say, as well as everything to what Matt just said there, the technology. In the last 15 years, you can access people's voting records, where they are, where their surgeries are, their Wikipedia profiles. It's no coincidence that in that period we've also had multiple MPs being killed. So I think a lot's changed technologically, culturally, and yet at the same time, we're not really giving these people the sort of safety and security they deserve.
Well, up next at 7 o'clock, of course, you'll know by now, Nigel Farage. He's just been listening in to a little bit of that. Nigel, good evening to you. What do you make to it all?
Good evening. Well, I know all about threats, violence and the need for security because I had to live like that, Michelle, for many, many years. But I think what the Mike Freer case really says to us writ large is we've now got political, religious sectarianism in the country. We've never had it in the mainland UK before. And as a result of it, I really believe that our members of parliament need security and need protection. And that's the argument I'm going to make at 7 o'clock tonight. Yes, I know it'll cost taxpayers money. But if we finish up with MPs too scared to say what they think, our democracy will be a big loser.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I look forward to that. Nigel, so that's Nigel. He will be getting into that and more, I'm sure, at 7 o'clock tonight. You see, what I found interesting today is people's responses to Mike Freer's resignation letter. So you had people like Suella Braverman. She basically says this is a serious indictment of where we are in society. I found Robert Jenrick, his response quite interesting, ladies and gents, because he basically tweeted out and he linked back to an article that he'd written when David Amess was killed. And what he reflects on is that there was this whole notion that even though people knew that this was linked to radical Islamist extremism, there was this whole notion that actually within politics, instead of talking about that stuff, they were actually talking about how do we be nicer to each other on social media, etc., etc. What then struck me, talk about history repeating itself, is Lindsay Hoyle. So he has come out today speaking about this subject, saying he's urged MPs to turn down the heat. People reflect how we treat each other, and that's why I want us to have a nicer politics within the House. Now, I don't mean to be funny, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, or to state the bleeding obvious or anything, but this MP has not been getting death threats. There's an alleged arson attack. I can't get into the specifics of that because it's an ongoing court case. The stuff that's been levied at this guy is not because MPs during question time have been a bit feisty and called each other Mr. Whippy or whatever it was that they were launching at each other. Why is this desperate attack to try and divert course instead of focusing on what it actually is, Matthew?
Because firstly, some people are scared. They don't want to call this what it is, which is the threat from radical Islamist terrorism. And also, I think some people are sort of part of this alliance now that I would call an alliance between a sort of soft left and radical Islamism. And we've seen this through some of the protests recently. The advance of radical Islamist terror and violence within our society is being enabled by a radical left, which is encouraging us all to basically look down on Israel, consider ourselves as oppressors, elevate minorities and give radical Islamism a free pass. We should call this what it is, like after the Manchester Evening News bombing, like after the teacher that I think is still in hiding from Birmingham, like after the attacks on school children in Kent and other counties by asylum seekers, dark, depressing sexual attacks. We should be able to call this what it is. This is a growing threat from radical Islamists. We need a serious response to it. We need to stop cowering in the aftermath, and we need to stop making these ridiculous excuses as to what's going on. These are radical Islamists. They're trying to disrupt and overturn our civilization. Let's call it what it is.
And what happens, Aaron, as well, is because most people can actually see this for what it is. They're not stupid. So then when the political class start doing things like, oh, yeah, turn down the heat, people reflect on how we treat each other. That's why I want us to have a nicer politics within the House. I don't dispute that, by the way. Yeah, let's all be nicer to each other. High five to that. But what that has got to do with this is a nonsense. And people at home, they know that. And then it just creates disconnection with the political class. And then we sit there and we wonder on things like elections, why is our turnout so low?
I think that's right. What I would say is, though, Michelle, I actually think the whole be nice thing is daft. I think it's stupid. I think something that GB News gets right that you get right is that people should be able to have opinions, strong opinions, debate them, discuss them, and then you reach a really, sensible position often if you listen to one another. And that's precisely what the political class in this country is afraid of. The whole be nice thing, I think, actually is part and parcel with the whole uni-party thing. We won't really discuss the problems facing society. We won't really offer solutions. We'll just take 80, 90 grand a year and we'll go to our Zone 1 dinner parties and we'll basically do the same thing we've done for the last 30 years. So the whole be nice, be kind thing, I'm very wary of. And also, like you say, it's just completely inappropriate here. We need to talk about substantive proposals, security, law enforcement. The police in this country have no resources to do anything. We keep on asking them to do more and more and more and more, and they get less and less resources. And let's be real, we have people in media saying we need to police the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Sea, we need to police global shipping lanes. Start with my local high street, please.
Yes.
Because the police aren't there.
But you must know and accept that we could have the best policing in the world, the best funded policing in the world, unless we deal with the underlying drivers of what's going on, which is large-scale migration and a broken model of multiculturalism, we're not going to deal with these issues over the longer term. These issues are only going to grow. In fact, I wrote this week, Britain is going to see the biggest increase of all European nations in the number of Muslims between now and 2030. We know we've got high levels of segregation in large parts of the country, but every time somebody whispers, we might have a problem with multiculturalism, the commentariat shut that debate down.
I'd love
and they
to
say,
respond,
well,
but
hang on a minute, diversity is our strength. If diversity is our strength, why are politicians leaving public office because they are scared for their lives? This ridiculous debate that we have in this country has to be exposed.
So, I mean, the idea that, majority Muslim countries can't be safe, anybody that's been to the UAE or Qatar or Saudi Arabia knows that's categorically not true. They're very safe countries if you're going there.
There's a reason for that, though.
Well, quite, and that is there's a strong state, there's a strong rule of law, and you can't muck about, and if you transgress, you're in trouble. Now, I wouldn't quite go as far as Saudi Arabia, but there's something to that. And then on the point of multiculturalism, same with Singapore, a multicultural society. In the 60s, people thought, actually, it was too multicultural. There were race riots. Now it is one of the wealthiest, most prosperous, most cohesive societies on planet Earth. Why? Again, strong state, strong rule of law, strong institutions, strong sense of shared identity. And those are the things I think we should be focusing on.
Yeah.
What brings us together and what institutions are going to do that, and a strong rule of law. If you muck about, you'll be punished. It's nothing personal, that's just how it works.
Yeah, good, and punish, you won't be punished. I mean, I'm listening to you, I'm like, I'm not, yeah, if you do wrong, you should be punished. You won't be punished.
You should be.
You barely even get caught. The police can barely even stop themselves talking about tweets to go out and police the streets.
We need to change that, though, Michelle.
It's the management and their strategies.
We need to change that.
Yes, we do. I'm in a bad mood tonight.
Well, there need to be consequences. If you break the law in this country, there need to be serious consequences. But also, our model of migration and multiculturalism is completely broken. One of the things that came out this week, as we saw, the new forecast from the Office for National Statistics, shows that between now and 2036, not a long time, just the next 12 years, we're going to have 6.6 million more people in the country. 6.1 million of those because of immigration from largely outside of Europe. Now, when we talk about building a cohesive, integrated society, it sounds very nice. Sadiq Khan says diversity is our strength. What we are importing, actually, are lots of people that don't share our values, that don't share our culture, our history, that don't really relate to who we are fundamentally as a people. And what concerns me, lastly, Aaron, just
please go on.
Me out. What concerns me is we don't have any serious plan in this country or in government for how we're going to manage immigration and multiculturalism over the next 20, 30 years. All we know is there's going to be a lot more of it, and it's going to happen very, very quickly, and a lot of people are going to feel very concerned about it. But I haven't heard any serious frontline politician come out and say, here's our strategy for managing this over the next 10, 12 years. We just don't do that. We're not a serious country when it comes to these kinds of issues.
See, I actually disagree with you, Matt, because you're saying that people are coming over here with different values. I actually think very frequently decision makers, policy makers, the people of real influence in this country, they're not proud of the values that we're meant to be proud of.
Well, I agree with you.
No, so I think that's so I think if somebody's coming over here, my father's an Iranian immigrant, he came here because he loved the idea of this country, rule of law, fairness, you can get on if you work hard. He still loves that idea. He won't ever hear a bad word said about Britain unless it's really merited, like the Iraq War or something crazy. So I think actually more people buy into this idea of a strong sense of identity, strong institutions, strong rule of law, than don't. I think that's a complete misnomer. The problem is we have an establishment who aren't willing to say, what do we care about? Gender equality, fairness, rule of law, you can be who you want to be, hard work pays. These are things we all believe in, and yet there's a political class that really doesn't, I don't know, they don't want to foster a sense of vision of that stuff actually encompassing people that when they come here, you need to adopt this. If you don't, you're probably not going to work out.
Well, because they don't believe in the nation state. I mean, they are basically, to use a word that some of my fellow writers have come up with, they're anywheres. They'll be comfortable anywhere. They don't fundamentally believe in the concept of the nation state and what it takes to build a strong, prosperous nation state. That's the problem. That's why they struggled with Brexit. That's why they don't want to reduce migration. That's why they're happy with this new model of importing hundreds of thousands of people from outside of Europe every year, even though they take more out of the economy than they put in. They're happy with this broken economy. They don't want an economy that is organised around productivity, areas outside of London, that pushes back against big business, that pushes back against globalisation.
I agree with that.
On all of these things, I think we agree. Where maybe we disagree is what I'm saying is that we are also rapidly importing not just an economic problem, but a cultural problem. We are importing a cultural problem in this country, which I would argue is rooted in groups and a religion that has a fundamentally different view of the world than Britain. And that, I think, is reflected not just in this case about an MP who's being chased out of public office, but in lots of similar cases of violence and harassment and abuse up and down this country among people that don't really share our values.
Look, one of the things that I thought was quite interesting, we're talking about Mike Freer, this MP, who says that he's not going to run again. He's got lots of death threats. We've spoken about this at length throughout the programme. I won't repeat myself. Anyway, one of the topics that's causing a lot of division, he would suggest, is the Israel-Hamas conflict and the UK response to that and the UK government response to that, etc. Where are you on that, Matt?
Well, I mean, irrespective, firstly, of where I am on that specific issue, any MP who's been elected to Parliament should be able to say what they think about any issue without being threatened with murder. So that's the first point. And the moment we start to retreat on some of that is the moment that we start to lose our liberal representative democracy. The second thing that I would say is, I think the aftermath of the October 7th attacks, the hideous atrocities committed by an Islamist terrorist group against Israel, has really pulled back the curtain for us all to see what's going on in this country. And I've written about this toxic combination that I see in Britain today, which is a sort of toxic alliance between a kind of woke radical left that is obsessed with identity politics, obsessed with seeing Israel and Jews as oppressors, and radical Islamists who are given a free pass by that group, as we saw on the protests. They're allowed to, sort of walk along with Hamas insignia and sing these gruesome songs, and the radical left kind of gives them a free pass. That is what I'm worried about. It's the alliance between those two groups that I think has become pressing and visible to everybody after the attacks.
Aaron?
With regards to Israel, Gaza, Israel, Palestine, Israel, Hamas, the question I think people need to ask is, how are Britain's interests being served here? A few days ago, there was a conference in Jerusalem, I believe, led by settlers, attended by about a third of the Israeli cabinet. One of the primary speakers there said we need to ethnically cleanse Gaza. They need to leave. The Palestinians, they need to leave. They'll go to, guess where? England and Scotland. 2.5 million people would come to Europe. How are our interests served by aligning ourselves with people who say, you know what, send them to the soft touch of Europe, because then Gazan beaches can become Israeli beaches. Furthermore, if they go to Egypt, people say, why don't the Egyptians take them? Egypt has 35%. If they get 2.5 million Palestinians, very, very major problems for them. If that becomes a failed state, it is 100 million people on the Mediterranean Sea. Right? If Iran becomes a failed state, that's 90 million people. 190 million people potentially in failed states over the next 20 years if certain people in the United States foreign policy establishment get their way. So that's the question. How are Britain's interests served? And I don't see how they're served by being on the same side in an Israeli government that is openly talking about millions of people coming to Europe.
Can I ask, because you would self-identify as being on the left.
Absolutely.
Right? So why haven't I seen people on the left over the last 48 hours coming out en masse to denounce the attacks and the harassment of this member of parliament who took a pro-Israel position? Where has all the condemnation been? Where are people online saying, it's outrageous that radical Islamists have been harassing this MP and making him feel that his life is under threat? Because I've not seen them.
I said it. I don't know how many other people have said it. I've said it. It's appalling.
I think radical Islamists are given a free pass by people on the radical left, and that's what concerns me about where we're going in this country.
But I think that there's maybe something to that. But the central question for me is, Matt, this is huge. This is huge. We are seeing a conflict in Gaza right now which could lead to British military bases in Cyprus or Bahrain being attacked by medium-range missiles. We could see 2 million people coming to Europe. We could see a potential failed state in Egypt. These are massive events which will echo for decades and decades and decades. This is appalling, and I agree with you, by the way. It should be condemned. It speaks volumes about everything going wrong in British politics. But we need to focus on what's right for Britain in all of this.
Well, I can tell you now, some of these conversations we could continue with for hours and hours, but for time reasons, I do need to call a halt to it there. I'll end the story just by reminding you of that update that I gave you at the start of the programme, the chap that, of course, the police are looking for in connection with that chemical attack, etc. Government sources have told GB News that he apparently was granted UK asylum after 2 failed attempts. Let's see what happens when it comes to the government, etc. etc., confirming that one, shall we? I think there will be lots of conversations to be had about that. But for now, Aaron Bastiani, thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Matt Goodwin, thank you for yours too. You guys, as always, very important to me. This conversation will continue, I'm sure, on Farage after the break. Night.